Bueno, gracias a todos por venir aquí. Bueno, tenemos el lujo, el privilegio de tener a Marta Rosler con nosotros, a Daniela Andújar y a Imma Prieto, directora de Esvaluar, pero especialmente agradecidos de que Marta Rosler esté aquí entre nosotros, que ha venido especialmente de Palma de Mallorca con un jet lag, con retraso de 4 horas, o sea, todo ha sido como realmente un esfuerzo titánico, pero bueno, aquí la veis con muchas ganas de estar entre nosotros y eso es un gran privilegio. Y bueno, la conversación va a ser en inglés y Marta, pues muchas gracias, Marta, de verdad. Thank you very much for being here and to share your knowledge with us. And I pass.
Bueno, obviamente, gracias a todas y todos por estar aquí esta tarde con nosotros. Me sumo a los agradecimientos de Gabriela. Thanks, Marta, for being here with us. Realmente ha sido un gran esfuerzo traerla porque ha sido todo un poco, no sé si decir anecdótico o bueno, ya eso tienes que ir improvisando a cada momento, pero estamos aquí. Y a Daniel, sin duda, por la gran exposición, que imagino que hoy también se aprovechará para poder interpretar o interpelar muchas de las imágenes que sin duda nos miran de una manera directa y clara. Y porque, de hecho, ahora mismo tenemos una exposición en Madrid, Patente de Corso, que también se produjo en Esvaluar. Dicho esto, coming back and talking in English, thanks especially for being here. I know that has been a great effort. These days have been very busy also. We have been in Esvaluar doing a laboratory of art and thought, and both of them were invited to talk and think together a little bit about precarity and work from the different point of view. But we are not talking to talk. We are not going to talk about that. It was these last days, and you won't be with us, so won't be used. So we would like to introduce some issues, some ideas, knowing that there are very different artists from different generations, perspectives, also, I mean, references. I think that they have different, well, some points in common, especially if we think how they use image to analyze the reality. And thinking in that, maybe we can introduce how to say it, from where we can talk about reality and which kind of image allow us to talk about other possibilities to create new narratives, no? Inside this world that each time, no, I think it's more highly full of images and etc. This is one. I think that we are sharing now some ideas. We had just now a conversation. This can be the beginning. And then I think that quickly we go to ask ourselves, what is reality? And are we sharing with them? It made me think in the book of Baudrillard, El Crimen Perfecto, the Perfect Crime. I don't know the translation in English, but I think that this book is each time more relevant and useful for us to understand reality, especially now that we are around of these images. And maybe between both of you we can go there. And also thinking this kind of proliferation of images, each time also I think that all these images are more flat. And thinking in both of your works, if something can give us to us the imaginary that you can create is the opposite. I mean, are images with a lot of shapes of meaning, and maybe it could be interesting to also stop us around there. I mean, in this world where each time there are more images, but all of them are too flat, with kind of imaginary, even if we talk about fake, I don't know if it's correct to talk about fake images or not, Danny will explain us that, how we can go deeply to questioning ourselves about these other possibilities to understand this world where we are. And from there, I think that I will pass to Marta or for Daniel. Go. Let's go.
Let's show.
So the uses of the image that your work approaches to other possibilities to understand our reality or our contemporaneity.
Depend on the viewers to answer that very question. What do we make of this? And of course, the whole phrase, what do we make of this, is both an idiom, meaning how do we understand this, but also how do we use it to construct a vision or a different point of view. But I'm not that comfortable trying to lecture about how to read my work because I wouldn't need to make the work. So I hate to be non-compliant, but this is more something I would like to hear from someone else. I think to try to give a little context to it, there's a reason why I use so many different media. It's because I also like to stand in a different place and say, let's now think about this from a different point of view, or even to work collaboratively with other people to help create something that inevitably has a multiplicity of standpoints and points of view because it's been collaborated on with named people, that is, they are owners of the work. But in that way, you're both constructing an audience and also denying the need for an audience by saying, well, we are making this work, and if you over there would like to participate, you can tell us what you need from the work and what you take from the work.
And in the positive now situation, because one of the strategies that I use to work on is just to bomb it with all this, how to physically live inside a landscape that is totally polluted of bombing this kind of imagery. It's something that when I started in the 90s to work in the first project in internet, it was to reproduce how the people need to confront it when a contemporary person, any of us working in the state, that you need how to defend for this bombing, permanent bombing, with very sophisticated language, but also very sophisticated medium. Most of the artists that we are working with little resources. You are confronted with publicity or marketing, no? To build up a simple image in the street, here in the city of Barcelona, something that maybe is a football player with underwear, to build up this simple photography, this simple image. Maybe they are, I don't know, 500 people working on, people doing Photoshops, people that is working in philosophy, in marketing, in tendencies, how to make the makeup, how to make the tendency for the new hair, the tattoos that they are wearing, how to create a style or something like that. And then you are confronting this photo, this cover, in 1 second. You have no resources, you have not the language to confronting with this reality. So for me, the way to interpreting reality is every time more and more complex. And something about the art practice, I always say, I said yesterday also, sorry, Marta, it to create this space of resistance to a world that every time is more and more controlled and more sophisticated. We have no capacity, like a human or like an artist and any other, to defend of this, to interpreting this sophistication. So we are like here with the flower, we are losing this biodiversity, but also the capacity to interpret in very complex language. And we are every time more and more controlled. So for me, now I am going to another part. the role of the artist, one of the role of the artist must be, or is working in this creating these spaces, no resistance, unless.
I would like to reflect on your reference to use a slightly different language, bombardment, a barrage of images that confronts us all. And I realized very early in my own work that a lot of what I had to do was to confront the bombardment in order to be able to have a thought. As a young person, I used to try not to see the advertisements in magazines that I was trying to read, and I would sometimes rip them out so that I could just read the article. And that made me want to think about what is the field of view and response that we have. I also worked in my high school library on old magazines, and there were many advertisements for bombers and all kinds of war material, very aggressive things from before I was born. So there was both a distance but also a presence, because that war footing that was confronting readers of Everyday Magazine was infusing our lives, even though war was somewhere else. And these are themes in my work. The now, the just past, the everyday, the multiplicity of messages, the way to segregate our thoughts from the thoughts that are intruding from the other side of the page. And it made me want to slow things down sometimes, to interfere in an image in some way. I started as an abstract expressionist painter. I didn't have to worry about ads for underwear or B-52 bombers. But I also began photographing everyday life and signs of, vernacular, almost like the Beschers, vernacular machinery in roads and streets that were used to repair and pave and help keep the city running, which was not a popular subject, but it was another way of saying there's more to see here than the shiny and the beautiful and the architecture. There's also the labor of producing these things and the structures that are involved. So on the one hand, I'm painting large abstractions. On the other hand, I'm looking at the fabric of everyday life and also about things that people do. But I never wanted to take pictures of people, and I still have problems with doing that. I just took all your pictures when we sat down, so I confess I do take pictures of groups of people, but I'm not a portraitist. But I try to move against the direct confrontation of the image invading my mental space by messing with it in one way or another, and by, I won't say cutting it up, though I've done that, but to cut into it somehow or to turn it sideways. Your discussion of what it takes to construct an image of desire. There's this rather wonderful movie by Haroun Faraki. I don't remember what it's called, but it's from the 70s, in which he spent a couple of days as a very young filmmaker, I guess, in a photographer's studio for a pornographic magazine such as Playboy, where he just shows you what it takes to get that living, breathing human being to hold a pose and to be the ground on which paint is place than lighting and so on. In other words, the construction of an image, which now takes place, as you describe, in a much more technicized universe where the woman doesn't even have to be there, I mean, obviously. But by reminding human beings that human beings are constructing images rather than there are messages coming, bombing you from the skies, which is my metaphor, I think has been a very potent driver of my work. And I change media. Sometimes I'll do a moving image, other times still, other times multiplication, all as a way of just interrupting that steady stream of incommensurable images that we are forced to deal with every day.
No, it's very interesting that you say, because for us, like a reference for our generation, how to stop and to maintaining the limit, it was like a really very helpful, but very interesting, because it was a time, I'm talking in particular, but I think from my generation, where to maintaining this position, this resistant position, how to analyze the imaginary, and how to build up, how to using the visual language like something that has a lot of power, especially now in this contemporary time. And even when the people is talking here that we are talking about artificial intelligence or the transforming technology, we must pay attention that the technology have the same problem that we are talking in collage, because collage after the 80s or something started to be something like a forbidden, something that you must take care, because the copyright, the laws, how to use in specifically, I don't know, we cannot use in, I remember in the 80s, after the 80s, we started talking that you cannot use technique that Picasso was using to put the brand, using the brand of El País or the journal, because then the company is coming back to say, okay, no, that's, you can use it, it's not about that, but it's copyright, no? It's our the title, how to cut in a simple page for the newspaper or something like that. And for many people, they don't know, it's look sometimes very sophisticated, but very complex in the way, but the whole technology is using exactly the same technique. Doing some collage is how to build up with the same topic, with the same canon, with the same restriction in theory and politically that we are using for many years, like an artist, no? It's like the same restriction when you are using a simple color like a red, can be interpreted totally different if you are using in China or in South Korea, that is totally forbidden, because red, like here in Spain some years ago, had the same transcription like an enemy, no? And it's just in the same, in the same US or something like that.
Actually, in graduate school, we used to debate, do colors have meaning? Because we all grew up with the memories of this kind of dogma that red means desire and blood and passion, and blue means coolness, and all the standard interpretations. And my professor was adamantly opposed to this, which he thought was idiotic and just an invention. Well, I don't actually have a position on it. I think he's right, and the other people are right also, but to talk about the politicization of color, I mean, red means red. You're a red. So that means you're a communist, which means you're an enemy, unless you're a communist, and then you're not an enemy, and then the color is a good color. But so what happened absurdly, I still can't believe that this happened with simple fix for the television networks and cable these days in the United States about 20 plus years ago. They were trapped in reporting, how do you visualize, we only have two parties, the the right and the less right, or the more right, whatever, you know. All the parties are center right or extreme right, and now more extreme right. Not a new idea, but we had no left anything because we were the good guys. But so they have to make it data visualization in its infancy. The Republicans, they're blue, the Democrats are red, because the Democrats are red. That is, they're reds. And at a certain point, they realized that this was not really a good idea because it was alienating the Democrats, who were not red and didn't want to be red. So they just switched them. So now the Republicans are red, which in that doxa of what the colors mean makes no sense. Well, then it makes it bloody, which they don't want to think of either, though of course they like the idea of red as passion. But the Democrats are so relieved to be cool and blue or whatever that we now think we talk about the red and the blue as though this was always the way it was. So this is a kind of a digression, but it is a way of talking about the malleability of symbolic representation and the fact that they, like everything we see, is naturalized. When I used to teach introductory photography, I always would show a picture from a magazine of a celebrity. It would usually People magazine, you know, and it would say, get to know so-and-so. And I would ask the class, so who knows this person? And they all knew the person. And I say, well, what's their favorite breakfast food? You know, whatever it is. And they were offended that I would ask them an irrelevant question. And they said, well, that's not what we know. I said, well, what do you mean by you know them? And this was a gulf in their understanding of what is brought to us by a picture. And I said, okay, so you know that you don't really know them, and this is just a way of talking about it. But how do you think you respond to a picture of eyes, nose, and mouth, especially one that you're familiar with? And this was a thought that they were too sophisticated to respond to an image. So we had to spend some time talking about what are unconscious responses and what are conscious ones, and how much are we willing to even consider our own responses to the visuality of anything in a photograph. So just trying to open up the possibility that there's more to consider there. I mean, it's easier in a pedagogical environment because you can have a discussion with people about what do you really see. It's possibly a little bit more difficult when you're trying to do a similar thing without standing next to the work or having captions that say this is an example of, you know, without didacticism. But I think in many ways this is something, the question of what is veracity is all the more in our faces now at a moment of the deep fake and so on. But I don't know, I wrote an article about deep fakes in 1984, you know, as soon as, because it was obvious, as soon as digitization appeared, there would be a moment in which, and it was actually discussed, that we could have a constructed image that would convey veracity, authenticity, and all these miraculous things that we wish we had onto an image, and that it would completely mess us up. But it's like climate change. It may be something we know about and we are afraid of, but we're not doing much about it. You know, we're not doing much about our understanding. So I love the fact that one of the inventors of this whole technology retired and said, by the way, this will destroy us all. And he testified in front of Congress. I mean, I don't even, if daily life weren't so daily and so full of needing to live, I don't know how we would be able to actually put up with this without, I don't know what.
Well, maybe coming back to some of the concepts that you have talked now, I'm interested in talk about curiosity and desire linked to the image, because I think it's something that we are losing it, especially in this iconography world of universe. And it's a kind of paradoxical thing how even these images created to create the desire create just the opposite. And this, or a desire that it's not true, always thinking about this faking world in somehow. And maybe how to these tools, like you said, everything has been constructed, image, even narratives has been constructed. We can think about all of these things. Maybe it's like a way to force a little bit the way to approach to this constructed image, the only chance that we have, to think in other possibilities. And maybe there we can find that desire and create new curiosity, especially because there are not closet meanings, maybe. And I don't know what you think about that. Especially now that we are
Yeah. Finally, all these are sometimes like a technical answer to some questions that are already on the table for the art for centuries, maybe, or maybe many years. Something that for me surprised in the last week, that we, the artists, like working with images or professional, like a critic or something, try for many years, like finally, there is a popular phenomenon that the people understood that an image is something that you build up for yourself. The connection with the reality, the capacity like a document, it was not really true. So it's something that you can make it something. But then the people 2 weeks ago, they saw the tram was getting by the police there, or the Francisco the Papa in a party, in a gay party, or drinking cocktail in some place with this, or wearing this yellow jacket or something like that, this inflation, and then the people say, what the fuck? We can make everything. And then what happened with the Iraq war? Who made that photo with the missile there, or what happened with all this manipulation or something like that? Who made it? And this is that for us, it was a joke for centuries, or maybe that this something is part of the process, of the artist process, build up, work for the power, work for the imperator, work for the church, work for the creating this idea of Christianity or something like that. Now you don't need to take photos outside, you can make it. You can just chat with the machine and they say, okay, I am talking a fake history. Netflix is very popular. They are putting, and they are a movie, 18th century, and then black people is not oppressed. Women is in an hedonist life or something like that. They are not hierarchy. Everybody is happy. So all this technique that they are using, Facebook, all these companies that they call the comfort cupola, how to be isolated, how to create something, how to work for the machinery to be happy, and then to create your own life, and just asking the machine, give me back the desire, no? I want to be happy. I want more likes. If I have no like, the technology is working like that. I cannot communicate because every time we are more and more isolated. Before I was, remember, beautiful magazine, Otagono from the 80s, and the issue was about domesticity. That it was very important. It was Cristo Bodisco, Beatriz Colomina, and Marta Rosler. For my generation, for example, in Spain, there was not much information about. It was very important to read it about this in this term. And now, what mean this? No, when we are living even at home, and you had your phone connecting with everybody, exactly what is the meaning, the real meaning of this? Where are our desires when you can create this cupola with that the Facebook again, because we are living a revival always in the 90s. It's like a deja vu, technological deja vu. In the 90s was Apple tried to create this metaverse, and now we have Facebook trying again with the same trick that we can live in this artificial totally contest.
I laughed because it's like generational differences, you know. Lots of people I know on Facebook are like crazy for Patti Smith, but Patti Smith really didn't figure in my life because it was the wrong generation. So, yes, Patti Smith is great. That's nice. For us, it wasn't Ottagano, which is actually a serious magazine. It was Mad Magazine, which was, you know, crass, crudely drawn, incredibly powerful humor in relationship to the shibboleths or verities of political life in nasty McCarthyite America in the 50s. And it gave birth to a whole generation of people who said, this is all bullshit. This is bullshit. We know because Mad Magazine showed with a great economy that this is all bullshit. In other words, it was like pulling aside the curtain with very straightforward mockery and absurdity. And what I want to say is, let's not totalize our subjugation, because there's a lot more in life where people actually go out and demonstrate for better jobs and living and against high prices and actually engage in face-to-face organizing. However, as recent studies have shown, and particularly in the United States, but not only, there's a huge epidemic of, if you can call it that, rising tide of suicide among teenagers at an earlier and earlier age. And they try to blame it on bullying and this and that and the other thing, but it's a despair about the future that is partly generated by the incorporation of young people into networks of face-to-face communication that are completely bogus. I know I, for one, feel greatly enriched by Facebook exposure to people I've never met or heard of and live in places I'll never visit. But on the other hand, when you're young, it is a way of separating you from the familial context and inserting you into the primal horde. And it's often not pretty, and it makes people feel they have no future. And with Instagram and during the pandemic, for young girls in particular, this has been a devastating experience because it has to do with the creation of a false face. You have to falsify your own appearance, which you know you can't carry out in person. So when you're young, you have fewer self-defense activities or rituals, especially since you already know you can't trust your parents, even if you trust your parents for many things and rely on them. So I'm arguing on two sides of a question. I think, in fact, we've known for a long time that those who invented the Facebook and the other charming things we spend our time on won't let their children engage in them. And it sounds like it's a rumor and a myth, but it's a fact, because they'll tell you, Zuckerberg will tell you that, no, our kids don't do this, because we know what it does, because we make it do it. We have these algorithms, that put you into an imaginary space that, in fact, is not the shared space you imagine. It is something we imagine, and it is, yes, we will admit, as he said to the senator, who said, how do you make money Senator, we sell ads. They also sell data, which they really don't want to talk about, but that's how they sell ads. And I know, to digress, we've all had the experience where we've talked about needing a coffee maker to a friend, and then we go online and our phone hasn't even been on, and then there are a million ads for coffee makers. And repeatedly, I've had this experience, and I'm sure you have too. So we are in a universe in which is haunted by the specter of other people's and corporate desires, and we figure in their drama, but at the same time we are still as human as they are, and are willing, if the house next door is burning down, to run out with other people and start pulling people out of the building. What I'm saying is that we're still the animals that actually are gregarious and wish to have genuine connections. I mean, obviously the specter of connection is what's being sold, but we still retain the desire and ability to engage in actual congregation and collaboration with other people. That's one of the values of school, and also non-school, is kids learn to be with other kids and be destroyed, but or not. But we are confronting a physical crisis that will require disentanglement from an artificial universe in order to solve it. And I don't know how we can do that while we are still engaged in trying to solve questions of representation. I would like to know how we demote the power of these. One way, of course, is to criticize them. But there has to be something else, because we're educated people. People who look at art are educated people, and it requires a lot of understanding that what you're looking at is not what is there, but a conversation about what you see or what you're shown. That is, that it itself is derealized. How do you convey truth at the same time you are saying you can't believe your eyes? And I think this is actually a very serious problem. I always try to say to people, don't devalue everything, because that leaves you drowning in a sea of nothing. There has to be a way to construct other ways of thinking and seeing and joining together at the same time. And if it is an act of kind of propagandistic connection, that's the way things work. I think it's actually extremely important to not merely criticize, but to say, as we used to say, not my generation, but we used to say it, another world is possible. But that other world or worlds need to be built. So here's where I get into the argument of art doesn't make change, people make change. And this is really crucial.
Sorry, yeah. Yes, in term, only in language, like I think it's something that also the other day we talk about Vittor Kemplen, lingua termini imperi, is when all these companies also occupy the space of the language, how we expressing something like we say before, domesticity, but also community. They occupy, when you create so even that we talk all the time, here we use the reference of Facebook. Sometimes when I am working with very young people, they don't know what means Facebook, because it's a private club for, I am already 50-something, 58, and they say, yeah, but Facebook, who is using? This is why Facebook by Instagram, but even Instagram for many people, it has no meaning, because when you are talking in this term, so all the language is permanent, because it's the strategy of the company to occupy this language, because it was used in politics in very brilliant and incredible, how I say, destroying the context, how language is working, and then when you try to make the puzzle again and to put all the pieces together, no, sorry, I understand a word there. Sorry. No, when so the territory is like the concept. It was also in the 80s, the public space. Where is the public space? So it's everything is totally cutted and in the same progressive way of using. So now the territory is very difficult how to create this space to have capacity to build up something that we can put on the table and share each other, and also with in which level.
I would like to introduce also a notion that both of you have been working a lot with it, and it's a reflection about the social class and how all these new tools, we are talking about a kind of revival with each, somehow maybe we can say new revolutions, or that give us the opportunity to use it in one way or to another. And I was wondering if maybe, if this one, do you think that are creating a new differences with, of course they will be new differences and big ones. I'm a little bit apocalyptic, I'm so sorry that you know that talking about artificial intelligence, I have my doubts about it, but even in an open way, in a positive one, what do you think that it can offer us, and which kind of new differences it will create to this new world, talking about social class? No, we have been discussing also these days about that.
Yeah. Right? In terms of language, I was using Kulturkampf. This is a word for the 30s again, and a lot of about Benjamin or something like that. That is already very old stuff. But the people is using in the state, in the campaign. Kulturkampf is something like a guerra cultural, is something that is on the table again. No? Something that they are. Where are the social class? There is a joke in the 90s. This is why I say that this is like a kind of déjà vu. In the city of Sheffield, to recycling, in this movement from the industrial society entering the informational society, the English government put a lot of capacity, a lot of money, all the lottery money, so they change all the laws that the lottery money is going, that they call the new informational society. How to recycling workers, all the class after the disaster from the 80s, how to recycle the whole society into a new society that can fly or surfing, that we say in the 90s, in this new informational society. And the whole plan, they spent millions and millions of pounds, and it was a total disaster. Social TV, social radio, hair radio, pop music museum. So I remember it was 300 million pounds or something. It doesn't exist anymore. How to recycling worker, even learning how to programming, how to something. You are going now there. All these industries, like they create an expectation, but the people now is like any other city. So they are no different between this Sheffield program and any other city in England, because the people is living in the same kind of service society, like we have here. We have theories or something, and they any other. I don't think that now we can identify or talking in the term of social class in this term, or we need to take care. It depends on the context, the political context, the cultural context, and the social.
Yeah, well, we are talking about uses of these new tools, but thinking in this new maybe differences between in the social class, we need to differentiate between use and abuse, because maybe the abuse of the technique can create this apocalyptic world that I can imagine.
But it's a déjà vu. When I was talking in the 90s with technology to the people, that maybe there is a new social class that they call info poor and rich, because at the same time, it's still like a north and south, rich people, poor people, and maybe you have no access to the new tools. Maybe you can be very rich, but you don't know how to pay the bill, because you don't know how to activate your Visa in your telephone, or how to contact the click when you enter the metro station or something like that. And then you are totally out of the system. But of course, even now, there are a lot of people in this planet, they have no access to the very basic thing, like water and electricity. You have no electricity, you have no access to the informational society. But something that is running in the same term that in the 90s is using the fear of the people. So now it's exactly, for me at least, I see exactly the same program that in the 90s. New technology, we are going to destroy employees, we are going to destroy how the people is creating. The people have the capacity to surf in all these things. And a tool is just a tool. A technology is just a technology. So it's something that we can put in the box, like we say before, red. What means to using red or collage? We can use it. I always put the same example. A knife, a hand. You put the frame here and a music. You open the frame, and then it's Ferran Adrià. Here on the table, jamón 5 jotas, and it's going to think. So this tool, you can create another scenario with somebody killing or something like that. It depends how to use it. But how to use in the fear? The people call artificial intelligence or whatever, and last year it was NFT, crypto, 1 year before or something like that. You can create all this topic around, but there are technology that is already there, the companies are using, everybody's using or something like that. You call silly assistant, it will be the same. And then for sure the people will use in the same term that you are using, because we are talking about intelligence or artificiality or something like that. We enter in a territory that the companies like to talk about. That is something, because the plan, what is the plan? That you can be an architect? To be an architect? You can say the machine, okay, I have 100 square meters, and I buy there a place where to make a house, copy the style or something. Of course you can do it, but you can do it 10 years ago. The thing is, after the pandemic is the gas to put all this plan on the table to accelerate the process, because all the companies they are waiting. The military are using the same technology. Sorry.
It's just, I become a little antsy and uncomfortable when I find that all our conversations are about the role of technology in transforming life. And of course, it is extremely powerful, but it is actually a reflection of social directions. It's not something, it's not like thunder and lightning that came down and all, it's not an invasion from Mars or whatever. It is under the control of people, and as you say, it's been something, it's shall we say, a business, corporate, military, whatever, projection of the world they would like to see, where they're cutting out all the things that don't matter. How do we kill more people? How do we not kill more people? How do we what do we deal with all the people who we threw out of factories? You know, they're forms of control that by necessity isolate a tool or a series of tools, which then is sold to the population as the only thing going, and it's, you know, going to ruin our lives, or it's going to invent our lives. But I always like to quote Manolo Borja, who said, yeah, that's what they said about what would happen when we printed the Bible. To which you want to say, but did it change the world? We need to actually talk about the degree to which it did, you know. But so I'm an American. We have the greatest interest in labor unions for the last 60 years, and all the people who might be working in factories are working in service industries. They're warehouse workers. This is a form of physical manual labor. They drive the trucks, they pick up the packages, they glue them shut, they deliver them, and these people, Amazon is forming labor unions from people whom Amazon said we don't have to care about them, they're uneducated and unsophisticated. By looking at the actual people who are starting the union, not projecting that these people must know nothing, they looked at the actual people who were working class black people. And now they've started a union. Whether it can go forward is another question, because of, just to say, starting a union and having it actually be recognized as a partner in contract making is no small thing. And it is a complex process. But the attitude of Americans on polls now is 60% positive toward the formation of unions. What does this tell you? Unions have been the Soviet Union for the last 100+ years, and is evil and immoral and bad for you, and it'll lead to bleeding gums and sore feet, and they'll steal all your money and nothing will come of it. But people know that when you join together, you know, there's nothing so feeble as a feeble voice of one, but the union makes us strong. It's obvious. Everybody knows that. When you have a team and people work on a team, you can win against the other team, whatever. So what I'm saying is that meanwhile, other currents that are driven by economic need, that is getting the drone to Amazon to land in the back garden, or we don't have that now, but
and also we talked the other day with Sandro Medrasa that one of the strategical economical point is not talking about some kind of technology, because this technology is used for something. And some strategical play now, where they are the money on the table, is logistic and distribution. And they are something very, very strategic, is food. Access to fresh food, what the people eat, and there we can identify better in the state this class. There are a hierarchy there, and I say this simplification, but you simplify even more, that they are only one part, that the mall in the state, most in Texas, no? The same company, you have two entrances. In one you have a basket that you can put $200 of food inside, and the other basket is only for $100. It's very big, quite big. And it's different entrance, the same company. One is called Eco Healthy Food, blah, blah, blah. One aguacate costs $10, and the other, you can take a croissant, like 100 croissant for $5 in the packet or something like that. And something, for example, is something that the technology is using for, and it's the first time in our history, in the history of the humanity, that the worker, talking about class, they are obliged to eat some food that is made. It's made in the factory. It's totally artificial, cheese that they have no milk, something that is just protein with something like that, even that they know that they are doing. And they are become like a very big or not healthy, and they are living less than other people that they enter for the other
I tell you that Soylent Green is people. I see the audience doesn't doesn't get this reference. Too bad. Yeah.
At the moment, put a question to Martha or Danny.
Thank you to both, also to Imma for this brilliant conversation. And it's amazing to hear you both, also Danny and Martha. You've been always working somehow against the grain of, reading images at face value and trying to find this critical position at any time, which means that it has to evolve, it has to be different, and we have to keep learning every day, But I get the feeling that there is something that is very persistent, even from your very beginnings in your career, Martha, which is the crisis of evidence, and it is still in place. No matter the strategies we have been deploying or you have been deploying, evidence was in crisis in the 70s, and then you get these sort of critical representations, approaches, etc., or new documentary practices that were no longer looking for evidence, but for some kind of new documents, or with Danny, dealing with this ecology of images in which, there is no reality in there. There's something, it's absolutely constructed. But then again, when one looks at the way we behave in public opinion, we need images in order to talk about something that has happened. If there is no image, there is no debate, there is no conversation. And that event or that fact goes with no discussion. And then that issue cannot really make any progress in our public opinion sphere. So, there seems to be a limit there, Then you have strategies like forensic architecture. They say, okay, evidence is in crisis, but then let's make the objects speak for themselves. And they are brilliant at constructing these arguments, and they bring these arguments to court, and they work. It's true. So I would like you to sort of review this, our relationship with the notion of evidence, because we never get rid of it.
Well, it certainly has been there for a lot longer than the 70s, even in the 20th century. It goes well before that, but in the 20th century you have, as a result of World War I, a government figure writing a book called Propaganda Techniques in the World War, and the best propagandist is a journalist, and leaving open the question whether the journalist is a paid shell or is a willing purveyor of false information that the journalist actually believes. It doesn't matter. As a result of this, however, at a certain point, the right attacked the press, and now the press in the US has no credibility, and yet millions and millions and millions of people particularly have a will to believe. The will to believe is very powerful, and of course, you'd have to be an idiot not to recognize the relationship between fascism and the manipulation of the will to believe, and in particular, the manipulation of authoritarian figures and, the presentation of infallibility or even deeply infallible figures, which is very popular in certain forms of Christianity, but also clearly in leaders. Like, can I name one? Donald Trump, but certainly he didn't invent, the sinner who will save you by assuming everyone sins and being, God works in mysterious ways. This is a very powerful thing, and it's extremely difficult for a rationalist like me to deal with people who believe palpably crazy things, like Jewish space lasers. What are you talking about, you maniac? Well, of course, he doesn't do that, but the public discourse in the United States has sunk to a level that's like a parody or a comedy, with crazy people saying things that, but at the same time, there are people who get, like forensic architects, say, yeah, you can say anything you want. We're going to show you data that you can't argue with because even you, poor benighted QAnon follower, believe something. Well, not everybody, but many people will be convinced by statistical evidence, by visual evidence tied to statistics and to people's testimony. And although we don't believe anything, we believe everything. What I'm saying is that it's not simple. What counts as believable evidence is a complex thing that is constantly under manipulation, that is constantly under, say what? Well, I'm looking for you to give me a word, because I'm not sure how to characterize this. The fact that there has to be a constant iteration of the vision of the world that is counterfactual, but which you can persuade people is more comfortable to believe and fits more with their general orientation or, the zeitgeist that is driving them from an early age. So, sure, what is evidence? You can't believe your eyes. Everyone lies. And yet we don't operate that way because we wouldn't be able to step into the street and cross to get to the other side if we literally didn't believe what we saw or were told. And also, it's boring to have to think about. You become a paranoid schizophrenic, someone who has to hide because you don't know how to evaluate things, and you may be hearing a voice saying, no, 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 this isn't true. So that's an unfair analogy, and yet there are ways in which it's useful to think about the fact that the noise in your head could be telling you things. Either you're unconscious of it, and it just drives your, yes, I know that must be true because, whatever, or you're literally unable to differentiate. So, but this leads me to say, but most people can differentiate between whether the toaster that's plugged in will produce a piece of toast and other people who can't, because there are other forces at work that determine what it is that drives their decision-making mechanisms. So people like us who are interested in information and the way that information is encoded, particularly we can say in images, have to act as though this is a totalizing thing, and the fact that propaganda drives. The interesting thing is that no one is out there screaming, you told us there were weapons of mass destruction and now you're saying you knew it wasn't true. I don't understand why people aren't, well, I guess because we have more things to worry about. I think of this poor guy in England whose entire career, a reporter, a journalist for the BBC, his life was ruined by his saying, well, they sexed up the dossier, meaning that the Blair administration knew that there were, in fact, nothing. There was nothing there. Or the guy who went out in a field and shot himself because he was a scientist who said, hey, listen, this can't be true. And he was pilloried and driven mad. So our capacity to absorb the atrocities of that are far less atrocious than the fact that Bologna is underwater, or that half of Pakistan disappeared underwater for a good part of the year, or that people in, I don't know, Bucha were being murdered by the day, that there are tens of thousands of soldiers fighting in many countries, Sudan, Chad, the Democratic Republic, Ukraine, we know so much more that we have to pick and choose from the buffet or the smorgasbord of what drives the shape of our everyday life and the things that we care about. This is extremely difficult, and it, in a way, demotes the question of the believability of things. You can dismiss all reports about Russia or whatever it is, climate change, or you can you can make a sign that says birds aren't real, and you will wind up with millions of people who believe that birds aren't real. If you're, or the Flat Earth Society. I'm stopping.
I think we, like a human being, we have like a necessity to simplify everything, no? Sometimes we have not even the time to accepting the complexity. This is that I say, sometimes we are dealing with a very complex language, and every time more and more, no? And when we are talking about evidence, it's, you see my word, I love it because sometimes it's in Patente de Corso, the project that we have in Madrid, is something I am using an analogy that is coming for 1,000 years ago. When you say Christianity, I remember again, no? Another paisano, somebody like Miguel Hernandez, is Ibn Arabi, is the master of the Sufi. He founded the Quran or something like that. He born also like 25 kilometers from my hometown, also, like Miguel Hernandez. He was tried to describe the reality, always using the Quran, no? Across the religious something in this madrasa. He was like the main philosopher at that time. We can say peninsular or Spanish or whatever, in the contemporary time. He was an astronomer, mathematic, very much. He needed to leave the Sicilian, emigrate also, moving to Granada, after to Sevilla, Morocco, and then to Damascus. But now, recently in the 60s, there is a catedrátic of Arabic studies, and he finds some books that he translates into some language, and he starts to make some drawing to understand that Ibn Arabi was describing. That he was describing is the idea of the hell that is used in Christianity more than in the Muslim thing. This catedrátic in the 60s, it wasn't a scandal at that time. We live under Franco, who believed somebody studying in a Franquist university in Madrid, even about Arab studies or something like that. No one paid attention, but recently everybody is accepting that Dante Alighieri, the whole article, the whole narration about the idea of the hell is translated into images by all the machinery of the Christianity at that time. And then after Dante Alighieri, not only about the poems, but the graphic, how they describe it, that they are a whole. I don't know, because I never talk in my English from the bar, is not talking about religion or something. Cuando estás pecando, you are going deep and deep and deep in this hole. You see the relation in the 60s of the whole drawing, that they are concentric circle. When you have gula, you have something like that, you are going deeper and deeper something. So for me, it's very interesting in this idea of how to broadcast or projecting some image, this kind of images, when it's already, when you have the machinery that the Catholic, especially the Catholic Imperial, Felipe II, using in a very strong way. He was believing that the Imperator needs to be a painting like we can see now in the Museo del Prado, the horse, the man, the iron, something like that, this Pica and Flanders, going to Flanders and say, I am the Imperator of this world. And then this don't have or don't use in this technology or something like that. And this is when I say today that the photography taking this power during many times, the people are accepting like a document of the reality. They say, even that you say, no, Stalin is cleaning here. Lenin was not here, it was another. And then they killed these people, and they are all, even that we know all these sequences, all this manipulation. Then when Ceausescu was in the photo, the people say, they kill it, it's already there, died. And so I think that we, the artists, not now, I say it was the role for centuries, how to use in the language, how to, now that they say the visual landscape totally polluted, a million of impact, or sometimes you have the photo here, how you can analyze. You have this image here, try to go around to see what is the structure maintain this image, how we build up this building, and how we adopting or accepting this like a document of reality or like a evidence or something. Because if we don't get this distance, we don't know how to analyze this, and for this you need to accept in this complexity. Who open a web page and say code to see how you put the HTML? It's open source. It's a language. It's very simple. Photo center, so you can put all the tags. Well, now it's more complex. But in the 90s, it was just where to put the photo, how to make bigger, something like that. You had the code, and most of the people, they never give, even it's in the browser, you just say, okay, code. What to learn? Of course, you need to learn a complex language to understand how to build up a form or any web page.
You have to want to do that and
yeah,
not see it as distracting you on the path to finding out whether the Zara is open till 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. You know, I mean, there are more important things in life. You have to go buy a dress or whatever it is, you know. But so, I mean, the problem is, you know, we're always being distracted by people saying, well, is it true or not true? Well, it depends on what. So you say, well, it's not the role of art to tell you what's true. It's more helpful to think of it, truth as an asymptote that you can get closer and closer to, but that you, of course, have, you know, like the propaganda network of Murdoch, we present, you decide. I mean, this is a diabolical thing for a liar to say, but that's because it has a certain rationality to it. You know, you offer some clues, and then people have the opportunity to engage with it and decide what is true. But some things, you have to know what's true and what's not. Like I said, you know, you need to know if the car is going to stop for the light or whatever it is. But I think people have known forever that some things aren't really actually true, and that even there is a collective agreement that we will ritualize certain formulae about what drives life, because that keeps our community live and together. And then we discover that we've been betrayed in modern life by accepting these verities. And that's been a crisis since, I don't know, clearly since the Industrial Revolution, but surely before that as well. But the more people have the opportunity to have free time from labor, and whether it's paid or unpaid labor, the more they will get in trouble by speculating on what's true. And sometimes it's good trouble and leads to revolution or whatever, however you want to define it. But I don't think it's helpful to say that we've reached, and I keep want to say this as I said before, it's not so helpful to say we've reached a point where we really know we can't believe anything, because, you know, that's like a totalizing overstatement, and it either leads to despair or too much fun, opting out, you know, of life.
Someone else? Yeah.
Hi. What you just said made me think about a poster I just read coming here with a sentence by Julian Guita, a noted Spanish Euro-communist. I think we could agree he was in democracy from the 80s, saying, "I don't fear the noise of the power, I fear the silence of the people." But I believe that we are living exactly the opposite times, right? I mean, we are living in the noise of the people, and the power is very silent. The real power is going under the radar. And I would like to cross this reflection with your idea of the line of resistance, which I feel very much aligned with, being an architect and being especially interested in the public space and what sort of things happen in public spaces. And how do you think your art as line of resistance can help to bring silence to the people and to expose the noise of the power in the public space?
Art like something that you can use, or a tool that the people can. I don't know. I think it's how to my personal position, how to establish the conversation with the work, with the people, no? In which context you are putting this, no? And I always say this when I say no confronting the A side of the images, but take a look in the back, no? Because I think if you discover the code, that is say, because I am coming from this, this hacker language or something like that, but you see how to build up the sentence. You know the language. You can interpret in the language or something. It's a tool that you can use like an artist, but also the rest of the people can act in this to interpret in their reality. I don't say that I have the voice or this is an unidirectional language or something like that. It's something that you try to put question on the table and the people can take it also to question from their role. And for me it was it was very important. Now that you say Manolo Bojas, we are talking about the community, because yesterday I make a joke also how the people interpreting even the language, no? With this campaign, especially in Madrid, about Reina Sofia, like a communist program, something like that. But then in parallel, they are the same newspaper in a communist contest. Doing the opening, everybody was celebrating because Picasso was a member of the Communist Party. And he put a lot of money. He was putting money every year to maintaining the French Communist Party till the end of their life. As I know, Manolo never said that it's from Podemos or from the Communist Party, and even the institution never say something like that. But then the people can take it this with the little finger or something like that. So the language is always totally manipulated, and sometimes you have no. We cannot use it anymore in the same terms or something like that. But yeah, I don't know. It helped. Like a strategy, of course, my strategy was everything is working like a tool, in the same sense that maybe is useful for me in my normal life. Maybe somebody else can use it, no, and discover something like that. So that they make sometimes they are silly or very simple reflection about something that you are spending a lot of time, no? And then you discover you are talking about, I was talking about the Mediterranean and the Corsarian Laos or something, and then I find this idea of Benarabi that it's very far, because even here in Spain, they are not really studies to interpreting that happened 500 years ago, and maybe we still, like happening in my hometown, we're still using a lot of the language, but we don't know the root. And we have the same construction to using in agricultural exploitation for centuries and centuries, and we don't know how we arrived there, no? If they are using by Moriscos, or how they implemented the technology, how they put in there, because they leave, and then we're still using the whole thing. I don't know if I answer.
Actually, I just wanted to first thank you very much, but there's something that I leave places like these and conversations like these with this exactly what you said about the feeling of despair and saturation of these 2D and 3D experiences in a way. And to go back to the question of the public space, I mean, this is something incredibly relevant, which is the body and the four-dimensional experience. I mean, which space does it occupy in art today? It feels like, isn't it that which we kind of are missing a lot in our conversations and our experiences and our lives, which takes me back to Joseph Beuys' Art as Life and his kind of, I mean, partly founding the Green movement in Germany. So where are we in that sort of, referring back to the unions in Amazon, where are we as people with power standing in this path?
Yeah, well, who knows? The figuration of the body and its presence in our thinking has always been really fraught. If you think about, of course, images of women, the images of women are almost always prescriptive and rarely produced by women. This is a truism. They explain what a woman is and what she should look like and act like, and to whom she should pay obeisance and obedience. Women, of course, have always produced other images that suggest something different and may not have the circulation that these official naturalizations of behavior have. But in other societies, there are fetishistic representations of women's bodies, which we accept at our peril as something other than fetishism, because, as Freud pointed out, no matter what you think of Freud, the essay on fetishism is immensely powerful, because, as the women's movement pointed out, putting women on a pedestal is to disempower them. That is, to fetishize women's power in imagery and representations, narrative, is to make it impossible for them to act. So there have been constant rebellions of women of all classes against that fetishization and making demands for the right to be active subjects, which is something different. And that in itself produces a dynamic form of representation, especially when it actually takes place in public. And we were discussing, are there public places anymore? But I don't want to make you feel bad, but I think there probably are, but whatever. The So what worries me at the moment about representations of bodies is, and I'm talking now about the US, but I'm having a strong feeling that it's probably much more pervasive, is the effort to engage in the kind of a neoliberal individuation of people. You know, there's no such thing as society. It's popped into my head. There are only individuals and families. And God help us in the family as well. But all parties have, since at least the Second World War, if not before, reminded people that the central unit of society is the family, and you better make sure you have one and pay attention to it and guard it, because that's what is the haven in a heartless world, which we don't even ever talk about anymore. But, you know, it can be of all gender identities or whatever it is, make sure you have one. Though the idea of, you know, non-normative heterosexual marriage is under threat, that's a repetitive propaganda weapon, and now takes the form of attack on transgender people, because it's just another way of saying queer, as for the people who are in tech. But what I'm concerned about is the emotionalization of the rhetoric of response to public life and communal life, which inevitably both creates bonds with other people and shatters them at the same time. Both possibilities are there. And again, I want to return to, you know, that evil word fascism. Fascism is an expressionist form of communality, in which rational behavior is downplayed in favor of emotive responses and the generation of emotive responses, which are lodged somehow within ourselves. And a self is encapsulated in a body, an individual body. So that's my worst fear, because I see it happening, and I also see, oddly enough, and I am by no means the first person to mention this, that people 35 and under respond most to that kind of appeal and to questions of, well, I'll put it another way. I've actually written about this. One of the things that the tech world has brought us is an evaluation of the adult as a child, and the fact that people who are really good at what they do are children, and life is a summer camp, and you know, you go to work and they take care of you. You don't have to cook or go to a restaurant. It's at work, and you don't have to wear grown-up clothing. You can wear children's clothing and go to camp all the time. And the rethinking of urban spaces as summer camp, in which the undesirable are gently or not so gently excluded or sent off to the margins to live in tents or under the bridge, which I'm not exaggerating. I think that this has been a persistent trend. And of course, when you're a child, someone else takes responsibility for the ongoing course of society and the economy and so on. You get to play, you get to send a rocket into space, or your car in a rocket in space, or, you know, or to say that George Soros wants to destroy the universe, which is his latest remark. Hates people and wants to destroy humanity. You get to be a child and not be accountable for your actions and behavior, which doesn't mean that I am against focus on the body, as I've called it. It's essential, but we also have to be aware that it's itself subject to major manipulation because of the potential commodification, both in terms of literal commodification through corporate sales, but also the re-regulation of the emotional life of individuals, partly through, painting your face properly or wearing the right whatever. So I think this is really complicated, and it worries me that I don't hear enough conversation about the way that I can see the radio and television stations in my city and country stepping back from complex subjects and saying, what was your favorite song when you grew up? This is on a news show. And there's always more and more of this, It's like asking a child, what's your favorite color? But these are supposedly adults in their 30s, and actually a lot of my former colleagues are leaving teaching because they feel that students are refusing to read or engage in text. And I know the US can't be alone in this. If people are refusing to actually confront difficult ideas that are essential, not through osmosis, but through discussion and contemplation, or it's not a good word, but thinking, we are deeply in trouble, because this is, again, that infantilization idea. I'm sorry to have overwhelmed you. I don't mean... I'm saying that we may not be in the best moment in which to try and ward off despair by trying to return to the essential, focus on difference and commonality as embodied.
Very relevant question and very complex, because also to talking about, and also we are in the time we are talking in terms of technology. We are very close to. This is also a consequence of the pandemic. Is put the feet something and accelerate a lot of processes that they were there, and the people have a lot of fear. The technology was already there, so we are very, very, very soon to hack the body, because the body now is already used into data, and then we start to redesign the body. It's not transforming across medicine and surgery or chemistry. We can start to think into redesign. This is the vaccine or something. So all these scripts, new technology that is made by computers, so you get the ARN and start to modify like a hacker thing when you see the thing. And then when the people start to take decisions, and there are a lot of polls because the company, this is why there are a lot of concentration, a myriad of big company dealing with health, business or something. The popular decision that we are taking, it comes back to the question that they made during Documenta at Athens. The people take exactly the same canon that 2,500 years ago. So this Greco-Roman canon of how we explain the body, this fantasy that the body have a way to be represented. Now the people is changing their bodies in the gymnasium or something, physically. But then, in the next future, maybe we have the technology. Even now, it will take years or months or centuries, but this is very sad. And for me, this is very relevant when the people start, and also it's the question with the Instagram. After Documenta, I have a lot of invitations to make workshops with teens. And the school, the direction of the pedagogical department, even from the government, say, no, we have a pandemic. The over-sexualization, especially in women, girls, how they represent in themselves or something like that. The father, everybody have fear because they believe that the doctor is going to be an artist, so they buy the studio, the camera, very good camera, something like that, and then they are not representing, try to interpret it, they are taking selfies, so it's an auto-portrait to representing themselves in the way that the technology is offering. It's not something that is not a pandemic, and of course it's not a pathology, because all these terms I saw in document. People teaching other kids, they tell you that we have a pandemic, and talking in this term that I didn't hear for years and years, maybe some decades. And for me, there are all these contradictions that, and all these paradox. In some point, we see like a new generation, they have more freedom to decide their sexuality and how to be represented. And in the other side, how they are taking exactly the same decision that always and reproduce the same topic, and even exercise this topic of putting in another level. And we have exactly the same question when I was explaining before that some people, I don't know if it was asking that when we making documented, it was time ago in 2017, when I tried to transfer, I don't know if the people remember, we hacking all this representation, the Greco-Roman sculpture for the Greek from the Archaeological Museum and any other museum. And then you build up the model in 3D, and then we saw that the model is built up in polygons. We try to represent in this polygon that you can make it. It's a mathematical question. To represent in some form, you can make in curve. Paul Preciado say, why we cannot transform it? Daniel hacked the software, say, Paul, this is very sophisticated. It's a software very sophisticated. Why you cannot model in another thing? But the more simple thing was when we tried to change the gender from male to female, it was impossible. The software have not the option, because the people doing the software, that is normally for video games or something like that, they decided that this is not necessary. And but the funny thing, it was like you can make a person like 3 meters high, put the finger like a very long, something like that, but then the program have an alert and say, you are in fantasy model now. And then you can transform it. But did you try to change the genital? It was impossible. The program said it's impossible. And then we need to change this to hacking the whole system. And for me, this is sometimes this strategy that is very sophisticated in the way, even technically, but to offer like a language that the people need the knowledge to transform in the way that we are taking our position, even in the public space, that for me, public space, that we say it doesn't exist anymore. Since in the 90s, I think it was a discussion that was a little bit over.
Well, I think we are going to... thank you very much, all of you. Thank you, Martha.
Thank you to our native speakers of English for participating. I appreciate it. Sorry.
Thanks to both of you, Dani, Martha, and the gallery, Gabriela, Kiko, and...